Hey guys, what's going on? So, I have for you a special deck today, and it is a mono blue Merfolk Wizards deck. So, doing something a little bit different, rather than playing one of the so-called best decks in the format, I am playing a deck that is a budget deck. This is a deck that is pretty easy to get a hold of. If you're playing on Magic Online, it's just a few tickets to make. It is designed by Wedge, the mana source, who came up with the main deck, and then I put my own spin on it, created the sideboard, and here we are. And we'll see if this deck is actually competitive, which I believe it is. So pretty simple mana base, right? We're not getting crazy with dual lands, 20 islands. We're a monocolor deck. Let's keep it simple. That's where we're starting. Okay. Then we've got our 1-drop creatures. So you'll notice a theme with the creature types. You want your creatures to be either a merfolk or a wizard. Siren Storm Tamer is a wizard, and there's not that many options for 1-drops in blue for standard, so Siren Storm Tamer is the best one. Then we have Opt as a way to kind of set up our draws. This is a pretty low land count deck, only 20 lands, so there's some card draw to kind of help you hit those 3rd and 4th land drops. That's the idea, at least. And there's a couple of spell pierces for counter magic. This deck has options in terms of counter magic, so it's playing a couple different counter spells. And then Unsummon. So Unsummon is a card that you don't normally see played, especially in main decks, but that doesn't mean it's not good enough to be played. Especially in a format with a lot of creatures, it's especially good against green decks with cards that you otherwise are going to have trouble interacting with. So the Unsummon, one way to interact with other creatures. We also have Merfolk Trickster. So double blue is an easy casting cost for this deck. It happens to be a Merfolk and a Wizard, which is perfect. And being able to tap an opposing creature and have it lose its abilities is very nice. Silvergill Adept is a card draw creature. There's a bunch of Merfolks in the deck. It's also a Merfolk Wizard, so it's one of the staples here. You're never sideboarding it out. It's perfect on turn 2. It's still good later on. Pretty much does everything this deck wants to be doing. Then we've got River Sneak, which is one that probably haven't seen much of in Standard, but you know what? The unblockability is nice, but the interaction with Naban of Iteration is also really good. So Naban of Iteration is if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, the ability triggers an additional time. So what you can do is, say you play a Merfolk Trickster or a Silvergill Adept with a River Sneak in play, then that River Sneak is going to double trigger. So it's going to double pump, and you're going to have that unblockability. Similarly, if I play Silvergill Adept, I can draw multiple cards because if I have a Naban in play. So Naban of Iteration is one of the really cool synergistic cards with the deck. It also works really well with the Academy Journey Mages in the sideboard. There's some charter courses, so it's more of a straight up card draw option, and then Blink of an Eye, it's basically a diversity from Unsummon. It can replace itself by turn 4 because you can kick it to draw that card, and it also has interaction with non-creature permanents. Then Wizard's Retort is basically Counterspell. Is Counterspell good? Well, yeah, it is. So 2 mana, it's almost always going to cost only 2 because of the amount of wizards in the deck. And then Kapala Warden of Waves is great against the decks with lots of removal. And it's also a Merfolk Wizard. So lots of Merfolk Wizards. Seafloor Oracle, also a Merfolk Wizard. And it is going to be really good with your evasive creatures, like the River Sneak, to be able to draw cards, fill up your hand, and make it so that you aren't running out of gas. So it's basically a bunch of cheap creatures backed by counter magic and bounce spells, and that's what blue has to offer. And in terms of the sideboard, Curious Obsession, it's gonna be good against against decks without a lot of removal because you get that continuous source of card advantage. And this deck wants to be attacking anyway, and it has evasive creatures that you can put the Curious Obsession onto. Sorcerer's Spyglass is just kind of a versatile sideboard card that can go into any deck pretty nicely. It's good against Planeswalkers specifically, or Heart of Kirin, which can be a bit problematic for the deck. Then we've got Negate as another counterspell against the control decks. Nimble Obstructionist is a wizard, as it turns out, and this deck wants to be playing at instant speed, especially against the controlling decks. The cycling can come up for activated abilities, and it's just a nice versatile creature to have access to. Tempest Djinn is the weird one, right? Because we are a mono blue creature deck, so you would think, alright, why are there not 4 Tempest Djinns in the main deck? But it's a Djinn, right? It's not a Merfolk, it's not a wizard, so it's not as synergistic as far as creature types go. If we want to take some of our creature synergy, like maybe our River Sneaks out, and we want a big flyer, we can still board it in. So there are 4 copies in the sideboard because it is a powerful card in a mono blue deck with all islands. And so we can go to it if we want to take some of our synergy out in exchange for some raw power in the Tempest Djinn. And then the Academy Journey Mages are really good against those creature decks where you can bounce 1 or even 2 creatures if there's an Naban in play. So yeah, the deck is cool, it's sweet, it's fun to play with, and I'm about to show you that it's actually competitive in this standard format. Alright, so to lead things off, we are on the draw. I'm going to keep this. We have a turn 2 Silvergill Adept lined up. And all of our creatures happen to be both Merfolk and Wizards, so that's a plus. So, okay, we have the ability to Spell Pierce something. Not sure we will have the opportunity to do that. Merfolk Trickster is an interesting draw step, but I think we want to go ahead and play the Adept first. We know that our opponent doesn't have counter magic available, so this is probably the most important creature in our hand just because it does draw a card when it enters the battlefield. Okay, search for Ascanta. So we are going to get in. And then the question becomes if we want to hold off and play this Merfolk Trickster end of turn. I think that's fine. Because we also have the Spell Pierce available to potentially counter something. Our opponent isn't playing a deck with a lot of creatures, so the tap effect unlikely to be too relevant. So I like leading off with the Siren Storm Tamer here, with 2 mana available to either play another creature or one of our counter spells. And we can just pass the turn here because we do have this Merfolk Trickster. And there's a glimmer of genius. So we can just Spell Pierce this. I'm gonna go for it. Just because we might not have a great opportunity to Spell Pierce, and it denies our opponent multiple cards. And I like, well, we still haven't hit our 4th land, so we don't have the option of going with something like the Seafloor Oracle. This decision is pretty close. We could hold up Wizard's Retort. I think I'm going to try to play a Silvergill Adept, though. It might get countered, but we have a pretty solid board set up already. Okay, so it does get syncopated. That's interesting. So our opponent actually is probably splashing white because they did cycle that Forsake the Worldly. So if they do pass the turn here, we have to be worried about cards like Torrential Gearhulk, but we have the Wizard's Retort as a counterspell. So at this point, I'm not really interested in committing anything more to the battlefields because it would mean not being able to hold up our counterspell. Alright, I think we're okay with letting that commit to memory happen. We still have 4 damage coming across. I think we actually don't play the Merfolk Trickster. We want to hold up this Wizard's Retort because if our opponent just has 1 spell, we can counter whatever that spell is. So we're going to try to counter this. Hopefully it works out. Okay, that's definitely annoying. Did not work out. Well, that sucks. I mean, we were taking a little bit of a gamble there by not end of turning the Trickster, hoping that our opponent didn't have something like they did have, which was the Contempt plus a Disallow. Very close to closing things out. We still have a lot of gas in hand, so it's not... Okay, Fatal Push, yeah, that's good. Things are sort of coming together for our opponent while we unfortunately just don't have the lands we need. The Seafloor Oracles are a little bit awkward here. That's the 3rd Vraska's Contempt. Okay. So our opponent probably is going to main phase the Vraska's Contempt. And that's to play around our Siren Storm Tamer being used to save our creature. I mean, we still have more plays, so our opponent's going to need to continue to find these sorts of removal spells, but the unfortunate part of it is that that Scanta the Sunken Ruin is going to allow our opponent to continue to have gas. Alright, there's a Syncopate for 3. I'm just going to go ahead and play out this Merfolk Trickster. That's going to play around another counterspell coming off of the Scanta. So our opponent is still in a spot where they need to find answers. Although if our opponent's tapping 6, this is bad news. There's the Torrential Gearhulk. And that allows our opponent to reuse one of their Vraska's Contempts. Well, no real option now. We've got our 4th land. We can play out the Seafloor Oracle. Merfolk Trickster allows us to have a way to tap down that Gearhulk. We'd really like our opponent to just hit a brick off this Scanta activation. A disallow, certainly not a brick. Well, we don't want to play out the Merfolk Trickster into disallow, so I'm going to play out another Oracle, which also is likely to get disallowed. Yeah, this game has been slipping for a few turns now. We'll see if we can somehow get things to swing back in our direction. So I'm going to go with Oracle plus Trickster. Lead on the Oracle in case of another counterspell here. And there is another counterspell. Alright, so now our opponent is a Scanta again. Found a disallow, but only has 2 mana. Okay, alright. So we're able to actually get this Trickster in to play. And attack for 4. And draw 2 cards. So we know about that disallow. Ugh, 2 lands. Exactly what we didn't want there. Well, is our opponent gonna... Oh, there's a Teferi Hero of Dominaria. That could... Well, we'll see what our opponent actually does with it. Yep. Getting rid of our Seafloor Oracle, and our opponent's able to now kind of stabilize. We need a big draw step here, but our opponent still has that disallow in hand. So we'll see if they actually counter this river sneak or not. We certainly don't want them to. We could lose our Trickster, one of our Tricksters, in exchange for 2 damage. We can probably also do that next turn. We could kill Teferi, but I think we just have to pass and hope that our opponent somehow doesn't find a removal spell here. there's a Fatal Push. Alright, I think we're done here. We came close, but Fatal Push can take out one of our creatures. Our opponent still has Disallow and Teferi. So, let's see what we can do for game number 2 here. So we do have the Tempest Gens. We have some negates as some additional counter magic. I think we want to be playing as many of our sheer high power level cards. We don't want cards like Unsummon or even Blink of an Eye, because our opponent just doesn't have that many permanents or creatures we really care about. I like the flash threats in the Nimble Obstructionist. Spyglass, it's an answer to some of what our opponent's doing, like the Teferi, for instance. Sure, we'll bring it in. And we have to cut some more creatures. I think we're just going to become more of like a good stuff mono blue deck and bring in the Tempest Gens, which this will make our Merfolk theme a little bit worse. Alright, let's try this. Yeah, game 1, I'm not sure that we took the wrong line, but as it turned out, we definitely took the wrong line. It's one of those situations where if our opponent's hand was face up, we might have been able to win. But yeah, unfortunately, things just kind of did not pan out. Just gonna end of turn the Merfolk Trickster here. If it gets syncopated, we can play Kapala, which seems pretty good. Alright, our opponent also could have, say, Fatal Push there, but did not. So it's either... Yeah, I guess I'm going to go for Kapala here. I mean, it makes life difficult on cards like Vraska's Contempts that really punished us in the last game. If we had this card, things would have gone very differently. Yep, there's that Search for Iskana. That card is pretty annoying. Ooh, a Tempest Gen, okay. That's a heavy hitting creature. Although our opponent might just use a removal spell on it if we cast it here. Interesting decision. We could also just end of turn the Nimble Obstructionist. I guess I'll just run out the Tempest Djinn. We're hoping it doesn't get Vraska's Contempted. But it's the highest upside play because if we're able to untap with it, we do still have the Wizard's Retort to be able to counter what our opponent might play. That's not good though. They kept a card on top. So I feel like a Vraska's Contempt might be incoming. Okay, cast down, similar. Doesn't gain our opponent 2 life, which is kind of good. So because we have double counterspell, I like passing and going for the Obstructionist at the end of our opponent's turn. Of course, we're going to use the negate there, as the Wizard's Retort can counter like a creature, like something like a Torrential Gearhulk. So looking okay. We've got the advantage with the Wizard's Retort at the ready. To Fairy. So we can just counter to Fairy here. Yeah, I think we do. We don't want to. We just want to end this game. Teferi can try to put something on top, or in the top 3 cards of our deck. We have the Siren's Storm Tamer, which we can use to protect the larger creatures. And so we're hoping this game just ends on the next turn. And okay, there we go. So game 3. You can see why we wouldn't want effects like Unsummon and Blink of an Eye in this matchup. Our opponent just doesn't have that many creatures. The River Sneaks are weird because they kind of force us to play creatures on our own turn to provide the bonus. So I'm not in love with those. Naban is fine here, but not as individually high impact as some of our other cards. So I think this is a good plan. We want to keep our density of Merfolk up to be able to trigger the Silvergill Adept routinely. And Naban is one of the non-Merfolks. Reminds me a lot of our first game hand, the Merfolk Trickster Beatdown. But only 2 lands. Search is going to be good here. Our opponent's on the play with it. I'm just going to run out the Trickster here, actually. We just really don't want it to be counterspelled. Our opponent could have a Fatal Push for it, but certainly don't want it to get syncopated or disallowed. So here, I think I'm going to chart a course. We're really looking for more action. That was unfortunate. Opponent's binning a Glimmer of Genius. That's kind of scary. Sorcerer Spyglass. If we do enter that late game situation, we can use this to answer a flipped search for a Scanta. So I'm using the opt to try to get another land because we desperately wanted another land there. It was a gamble that did not pay off. So now we're probably going to get punished. Yeah, there's a commit. Got too much gas this game. Not enough pressure. I mean, if we have two looks for a land. If we find the land and then have the counterspell, you know, the op play could have potentially worked out really well. It just turns out that the top of our library was not as kind as we would have liked. I mean, our opponent is down to only 2 cards, but we really need our draw to be an island. Or we would like it to be an island, at least. Well, this sucks. I'll just play a Merfolk Trickster out so you don't have to discard. And it got Vraska's Contempted. Well, if our opponent flips Search for a Scanta right now, we can then Sorcerer Spyglass it. Hopefully. Assuming that our opponent doesn't have a counterspell. So our opponent's probably digging for a counterspell and they found a disallow. That is bad news. Man, if we had, I feel like this game could have been ours pretty easily. It's been a pretty bad run out. Alright, well now we just pass and have to try to fight through the Scanta, which is rough. Even though we've got 7 cards to our opponent's 1, The Escanto represents a lot of card advantage. And I actually just realized in interaction I hadn't been thinking about before. We could use the Nimble Obstructionist to counter an Escana activation. And draw a card. Alright, let's try it. That was pretty cool, actually. We have another Sorcerous Spyglass in our deck. We could find that. Alright, let's go for a Silvergill Adept. That is going to run into Disallow. Spell Pierce, not so good when you get to this stage in the game, although we did find that Sorcerous Spyglass. That's bad news, though. Now our opponent has a way of closing out the game pretty quickly with that Gear Hulk. Ugh, what's this? Yep. Well, we can't really beat this at this point, unfortunately. Just kind of got a little bit mana screwed. So, came close. It was pretty back and forth, but this is going to do it. Alright, so on the draw, I like this hand. For sure. We've got our 1-drop. The only 1-drop in the deck, the Siren Storm Tamer. And then Adept for turn 2. Okay, Llanowar Elves, but our opponent had to use that energy off the Aether Hub. So our opponents might have some mana problems. We'll see if we can capitalize on that or not. In fact, our opponent might not have... Okay, so our opponent does have another land. It's another Aether Hub. And I'm interested why our opponent would actually play the land before the Branch Walker, though it might not have actually mattered. So we want to play the Adept before the Trickster to make sure that we're able to play the Adept for 2 mana. And it also happens to block the Branch Walker pretty well. I don't think this is a trade we mind. Although, could be a Blossoming Defense. Yep. So our opponent's going to aggressively save the Merfolk Branch Walker there. And then another one, so that's pretty good. We're kind of on the back foot now. You certainly want to get this Merfolk Trickster onto the battlefield. although it's going to mean not being able to have Wizard's Retort available to us. I guess I kind of like just using a Wizard's Retort, and then that allows us to opt. We can play the Merfolk Trickster next turn. Does mean we have to take 6. Okay. I think we take that. We have plenty of counter magic now, which is a good thing. Our opponent desperately wants lands for sure. No attacks. That's awkward. We don't actually have a Merfolk that we want to reveal here. I think I'm just going to pass so that we have the counterspell and the blink of an eye available. And then just trade a Trickster for Branchwalker. Yeah, definitely want to counter that Brontodon. Now we can play the Adept for 2 since we drew the River Sneak. And play the River Sneak with the Wizard's Retort and the Blink of an Eye if we need it. I was kind of hoping to be able to kick the Blink of an Eye because we might run out of fuel. But this game is pretty close. I think we want to trade the Adept for the Branchwalker if our opponent were to attack there, but they're not attacking. Naban. What do we want to do with Naban? I think we can play Naban here. Chip in for 2 points of damage. We would have loved to have Naban earlier when we were casting these Silvergill Adepts. Alright, end of turn, I'm going to go for the Blink of an Eye. On the Branchwalker, maybe our opponent has a Blossoming Fence, but looks like no. And now we can kind of do our thing. I think we might want to hold. No, just want to max damage this turn, I think. And that River Sneak is really getting pumped up now. Alright, so that worked out well for us. Our opponent stumbled a little bit, and we were able to capitalize. So, looks like a mono green deck. Lots of creatures. So, what does that mean in terms of sideboarding? Now becomes the question. We actually have a lot of cards we might want. Spell Pierce is one of the easier cuts. Also, not sure about the Siren Storm Tamers because our opponent doesn't have that much removal. And the bounce creatures seem pretty good. I like the Academy Journey Mages. The Tempest Djinns give us a way to race in the air. Kapala, I think we can cut because, once again, our opponent doesn't have that much removal. Might have some. Unsummon, pretty decent against creature decks. Curious Obsession is another card that we could consider. Maybe because we're on the draw, we don't want this stuff like the Chart of Courses. We just want to be a little bit more aggressive. I think that makes sense. River Sneak isn't quite as good once we're boarding in the Djinns and the Journey Mages. So I think we might just want to put back in the Siren Storm Tamers because they are our only one drop. And they work well with Curious Obsession. Alright, we need 3 more cards here. Alright, well, see how this works out. Okay. This is solid. Solid start. Now, mono blue decks traditionally can be a little bit weak to just huge creatures. Sheltered Thicket is an interesting start because we didn't see red cards out of our opponents, but now Rootbound Crag and Thicket. And a land, okay. So we could opt here. I think I'm going to save it, though, because we don't really know what we're actually looking for at this point. I think I'm going to play out the Naban, Dean of Iteration. It's good with our Merfolk Trickster. Certainly going to take this hit. And there's a Steel Leaf Champion. So I think we want to play the Merfolk Trickster. We could get the Tempest Djinn onto the battlefield, but I like going Trickster plus Opt because now we know we do want our 4th land to be able to play potentially this Academy Journey Mage, which could be quite nice. And we get to tap down both of our opponent's creatures, although there's a Blossoming Defense to answer. So that's going to allow our opponent to force in 7 damage that we can't do anything about. Voltaic Brawler. Don't always see that one. So certainly opting, hoping to find the land. Although Adept is good because we have Naban. So it would allow us to draw multiple cards. If we don't find the land this turn, it's a decent play. but we do really want that land pretty badly. So I think I'm going to put this on the bottom. Got the land anyway. Ooh, and another Journey Mage. Okay. We are in business. So I'm going to bounce the Brawler and the Steel Leaf here. Opponent could have another Blossoming Defense to stop this, but they already used, it looks like they're only one. So now we can start to turn the corner with some attacks and try to transition this, try to get this race in our favor. Our opponent's tapping, oh, Regisaur Alpha. That's a big boy. Alright, so now we have to do some math. We could take this 5 and then play another Academy Journey Mage, bouncing the token and the Regisaur, or bouncing. I think we take this. I do think we want the Journey Mage still in play. It's a dangerous game to be playing. Ooh, there's a Curious Obsession. Well, I think we kind of have to play out the Academy Journey Mage. Doesn't seem to be another option that's readily available, and we're kind of locked into bouncing the Regisaur and the Dinosaur because it allows us to attack in this turn, and we really need to get in for a bunch more damage to be able to try to erase what our opponent's doing. That puts our opponent down to 9. So this, I mean, our opponent's got inevitably a bunch of creatures in hand. We know about some of them. They might just replay Regisaur. And we'll see how they want to attack, which should be interesting to see. They attack with both. They're dead if we find another bounce spell here. If we don't, then we might be dead. I mean, we do have Unsummon and Blinks and Tricksters. I think we take this hit. We have the Opt to try to dig for something. So, yeah. Gonna cast it. There's the Unsummon. Alright, so maybe our opponent should have left a creature back, but that is gonna be the match. Okay, so we are on the draw. I'm gonna keep. And then our opponent has taken 1 mulligan. We've got the turn 2 Silvergill Adept. Or a River Sneak for that matter. Probably not going to play the Trickster on turn 2. Intriguing start from our opponents. Not sure what to make of Zhalfirin Void. Some sort of artifacts deck. We'll see how useful the Spell Pierce is going to be. Alright, we're going to counter this. Yeah, not positive what's going on over there, but just seemed like a pretty good opportunity to counter something. Alright, let's start off with the River Sneak. In case our opponent plays a creature, the unblock ability is going to be relevant. This could be like a Paradoxical Outcome deck, maybe. I'm going to play Naban because of the interaction with Silvergill Adept, we want to have that in play before we play the Adept. So yeah, I think our opponent's playing a Paradoxical Outcome deck. Not something you see every day, for sure. Maybe this is a counterspell. It is. Wow, that's brutal. We really wanted that Silvergill Adept in play. I don't think we could have. I don't think we should have, I should say, played around Metallic Rebuke, although it's a card we know about, know could be in this type of deck, but the fact that our opponent used that Rebuke means they are empty-handed, so they need to draw something good off the top, or else we are just going to beat them down this game. And there is a Merfolk Trickster, so we can lock that Ornithopter down, get in for 6. The question is, do we play this additional Trickster? I think we do, to get in for the additional damage this turn. Could save it for next turn. There is some logic to that. But this is 12 damage. Because of Naban with River Sneak. That's pretty crazy interaction. And that's going to do it for the first game. So now it's a pretty big question mark what we want against this deck that our opponent is playing. Sorceress Spyglass, is that a card we want? Not sure. We definitely want Negate. That's the easy one. We don't really want Unsummon. Nimble Obstructionist. I'm not sure on. Curious Obsession seems pretty good as another way to draw cards. I mean, we have a decent amount of counter magic. Paula doesn't seem great. Maybe we put in a Nimble Obstructionist. Sure, let's try this. I'm gonna keep in the blink of an eyes. Not confident if it's right. But the idea is to get an early clock and then back it up with, a counter magic on a counter spell on a key turn. So this should be a matchup that, if our opponent doesn't have a super explosive draw or are missing a piece of their combo like we saw in the first game, we can capitalize on that. This hand would be very good if we had 2 lands. Unfortunately, we only have 1, so I am in a mulligan. And, well, this kind of sucks. I'm going to keep this and hope to find that second land. Okay, so that's good. So we can at least make some headway on this board starting on next turn. Possibly get the Curious Obsession down. I think I'm going to lead on Adept because that's the card we really want to resolve. Just to be able to make sure we draw that additional card. It's not as good of a Curious Obsession target. Is this going to be a draw 3? Yeah. Reverse engineer pretty good there. Not gonna lie. Well, I think we want to play the Curious Obsession. So there's some logic here to passing with Spell Pierce, but I just feel like we need to get at least one more dude onto the battlefield and hope that our opponent can't do anything crazy here. Also, Spell Pierce is very different than Wizard's Retort in that it's not a hard counterspell. There's another Curious Obsession. I guess we can diversify where we put these. So I'll put the other one on the Naban. I assume we're just going to be attacking regardless. So we get to draw 2 cards. We love a Wizard's Retort. Found a Silvergill Adept. 2 Silvergill Adepts, so I'm going to play 1. Although we could play River Sneak, which would then potentially present lethal next turn. Sure, I'll try that. We'll try that. Now this is going to be interesting if our opponent goes for the counterspell. Do we now Spell Pierce back? So let's see, if our opponent does play a Paradoxical outcome here and bounce all of these artifacts, they still may not have a way to stop from dying on the following turn. So I guess I'm gonna go for the Spell Pierce. We'll see what our opponent can do. Okay, there's the Self-Fearing Void. Oh, wow. Okay, that sucks. Shoot. Well, clearly I messed up. Should have held the Spell Pierce rather than get greedy. Ugh, that feels bad. That was brutal. It's probably gonna lose us this game. Well, let's try to rebound from it. Was not thinking about Baral's expertise, was thinking about the Paradoxical outcome. But if our opponent doesn't draw the outcome itself, which is like the card draw of this deck, then... But they did. Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, our opponent is doing some pretty sweet stuff here, which if we pass there, let's see, they go expertise, we counter it, then they go outcome, then maybe we can win on the following turn. Although maybe they don't. I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's too hard to think about. At this point, we just let all of these shenanigans happen. So our opponent basically just drawed more or less infinite cards there. Although if we're able to draw a counterspell off of these other discarding an outcome. That's probably bad news. Alright, we did find a Wizard's Retort. So I like just sending in with the River Sneak and passing back with the Retort available. I mean, they might have Metallic Rebuke for our Retort, but I think it's still right to hold it up. Gonna let that Inspiring Statuary resolve. Alright, we pretty much have to try to counter this. Okay, that did work. So that's step one. Can we actually pull this off? We might be able to. Oh, wow. Merfolk Trickster off the top. We might be able to actually win this one after all. Alright, we're going to reveal the Trickster. Then we're going to play the Trickster. We can't tap Ornithopter down, but we can tap Padim down for sure. And now, yes. I believe we're gonna get in for lethal this turn. And that is gonna be the match. Wow. Okay, somehow came back from all of that. Great. Alright, so it looks like we're never gonna get to play with this deck, but we are still gonna keep this on the draw. Stormtaber into Trickster, into Opt. Not gonna be opting for a couple turns, it looks like. Long Tusk Cub, alright. Well, we can try to tap that, which we will be certainly doing. Don't traditionally see Long Tusk Cub that much anymore. Sage of Shiloh's claim, so it looks like our opponent's really trying to go off with energy interactions. So we can tap down the Cub here. However, it could pose a problem for us as the game goes on. Alright, so I'm going to keep that blink of an eye. It gives us a piece of interaction for the Long Tusk Cub. We could actually bounce it right here. Or we could Spell Pierce this. Interesting spot. We hope our opponent doesn't have a card like Blossoming Defense, certainly. I'm going to go for the Blink. It's a pretty big tempo play, potentially. That sucks. You knew it was a card our opponent might have, but felt like too good of an opportunity to pass up. But they did have it. And now we are firmly behind in this race. Ugh, wow. And a Greenbelt Rampager. So we can try to tap down the Longtusk Cub with the Trickster. But it does not feel like things are going our way at the moment. Sure, we'll take the 2. Why not? Our opponent definitely has a deck with a lot of energy synergies. I think we really need like another piece of interaction. I mean, we can play the Seafloor Oracle. It's just not. It's not going to do enough here. I'll get it onto the battlefield though. And so it looks like our opponent's just going ahead and loading up this cub. So we need to find something like another Blink of an Eye or an Unsummon. To be able to, well, okay, our opponent's actually getting very aggressive. Or potentially getting very aggressive. Thinking better of it. So it looks like we're probably taking 7 this turn. Which is a significant chunk of damage. Oof, wow. Our opponent's draw has just been very impressive here. Okay. We can use this Merfolk Trickster on the cub that has the cartouche on it. So I guess we're going to do that. Okay, another cup. Ugh. Yeah, I mean, we could chump block for a turn, but I don't know how we get out of this. So we put the Storm Tamer there, then our opponent has 7 creatures. Yep, we're just dead. Alright, let's see what we can do after sideboard. So the bounce mages seem decent. I think we want to take out Kapala. Curious Obsession also seems like it could be good. And then the Tempest Gins. Spell Pierce kind of looked pretty bad because we had it in our hand that last game and never really had a great opportunity to cast it. And then probably shave on some of the Merfolks, like a Seafloor, maybe a couple of River Sneaks. Yeah, Seafloor Oracle doesn't seem great because it's just hard to actually get through the larger creatures our opponent has. On the ground, at least, which is why these Tempest Gins came in. Pretty easy keep here. Just hoping that these Gins can beat our opponent down. Okay, our opponent does maybe have more blue. We saw the Cartouche as the only blue card, I believe, in that last game. Well, I'm going to attack in with Naban and offer the trade. Assume our opponent doesn't accept it. Yeah. We can now play a Tempest Gin. Which is a 3/4, so if our opponent attacks, they would have to basically, they're representing Blossoming Defense. Okay, Hadana's Climb. That can pump the cub here. Definitely have options. We have this Wizard's Retort. Kind of want to get in both the Tempest Gins onto the battlefield as well. I'm just gonna play another Tempest Gin. Unfortunate we don't have that 4th island, at least just yet. So we'll see what our opponent can muster up this turn. If we're able to untap in a decent spot, I like our chances. So if our opponent has another energy card, which they almost certainly do, they could use that to get energy, then pump the Cub, then use the Climb, then flip the Hadana's Climb. But it looks like they just want to wait on flipping the Climb. If we double blocked here, we would just get completely blown out by a Blossoming Defense, so I'm going to take it. And there is a Bristling Hydra, okay. Kind of want to opt to try to find another land, most likely. Unsummon, though. Is that good here? Could be. So if we attack for 6, 6 is a lot different than 7 in this spot. We can play the Siren Storm Tamer. Yeah, okay. I mean, we can try to bounce the Longtusk Cub. In fact, maybe we do that. Maybe we do bounce it on our turn to play around Blossoming Defense. That's interesting. Definitely a tough call. I'm going to go for it, though. You just don't want to get Blossoming Deed. It resets the Cub, and the attack from last turn signaled that our opponent might have the Blossoming Defense. So we do have a flyer, which we can... Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say we could use it to block. But there's the larger than life. And that's actually now created a lethal Bristling Hydra, which we couldn't really do anything about. There's nothing we could do about this. Unless we had held up Wizard's Retort. So, yep, this is lethal. Because the larger than life provides that trample. Provides trample. So kind of a sweet blue-green deck, and that's going to beat us.